Okay, good morning, everyone. I think we'll get started. Thank you for your patience while we sorted out the technical issues. Okay, so it's a lot of faces from last week, one or two new ones, I think. My name is Vaughan Kitson. If you still don't know that, that's me, the Deputy Head of Secondary as well as MYP Coordinator. Is the microphone okay? Yep. No. Is that any better if I speak closer to my mouth? Or Mr. Ivan, is the sound okay there? Well, he's got his thumb up. Okay, I'll do my best. With any luck, the recording is good. But if you don't hear me or I need to repeat anything, just let me know. And hopefully not every 2 seconds, but we'll see how we go. Okay, so we have similar number to last week. It's always tricky to tell because if I do a survey and I see who's coming, it could be anywhere between 50 and 250 people. So it's it's always interesting to see who turns up. It's great to see you all here. So today you'll be listening a lot to me, unfortunately. I'll try and make it as informative and useful as possible. And with any luck, you'll learn something. By the end of today, you guys should be, you should know more about the MYP than your children, to be fair. So that's the plan. Let's see how we go. Right, so the plan for today is to look at an overview of the subjects which are taught in the MYP, very briefly, as well as looking at a unit of study, how it's created, what goes into a unit of study, what makes it different to other systems. And then finally, we'll have a look at assessment. Last year, I had a whole separate session on assessment, but I think it's something that parents really want to know about from the beginning, so we will look at assessment as well. So things I won't be doing that much this week are looking at the details of ManageBack as the platform and the reporting details as such. That we'll have next week because it's quite a lot to get through this week. So for today, it's those items. Okay, so looking at the famous diagram, which I'm sure you've seen before, Mr. Ivan, can you just turn it up a little bit, see what happens? Is that that's a bit better, I think. Maybe a bit echoey, but louder. Okay. So the famous diagram, there's one for the PYP, the MYP, as well as the diploma program. Basically divides our program into the subject groups. There are 8 subject groups. So let's just quickly go through what is offered at Raha and a little bit about each subject. So in the language and literature subject group, we offer English A. There's no English B at Raha at the moment. So all students do English A, as well as Arabic A for the Arabic first language speakers. So if you're an Arabic A student, you do 2 subjects in that subject group. If you're not, you don't. Then we have individuals and societies, which most of us know as humanities, which in grades 6, 7, and 8 is basically geography and history. So you'll do 3 units in a year, usually 2 history, 1 geography, or 2 geography, 1 history. And then in grade 9 and 10, we start looking more into psychology, economics, and business. And it seems to change year by year. This year, the grade 10s should have a pretty good feel of history, geography, psychology, as well as some business studies and economics. So quite a lot. In grade 6, 7, and 8 mathematics, it's the same assessments, but we do differentiate as far as possible for different abilities. In grade 9 and 10, it's more of a natural differentiation because we have 2 separate subjects, standard mathematics and extended mathematics. Design, students in actually all the way through, do 1 semester of product design and 1 semester of digital design. In the arts in grades 6, 7, and 8, students do a carousel, so they'll do 1 term of music, 1 term of drama, 1 term of visual arts. In grade 9, end of grade 8, students will select a subject for grade 9, which they will do for the whole year. And there are 1 of 4 options, as you can see up there. The media option comes in grade 9, which is basically photography, making movies, that sort of thing. And then you still have your visual arts, which is sculpting, sketching, drawing, as well as drama and music. Then in grade 10, for the first time this year, we have options. And if you're a grade 10 parent, you will know that. So you actually have the option of dropping arts entirely. You also have the option of having 2 arts, 2 full year subjects. And that coincides with choices in science and design. And I'll get more into that when we talk about the sciences. Right, so there we go. Sciences in grades 6, 7, and 8 is general science or integrated sciences, which is a bit of everything, really. Physics, biology, chemistry. Then we get into grade 9, where it's still the distinct subjects. Sorry, it's more the distinct subjects, but the students still do all 3. They do 1 term of chemistry, 1 term of physics, 1 term of biology. And the challenge for them in grade 9 is to identify which science or sciences they prefer and are strongest in. And it's not all that easy. And we will try and have sessions sort of giving them more idea about the subjects, because they make a choice for grade 10. In grade 10, they can do 1 full year science in history, in physics, or in biology, or in chemistry. Or they can have 2 of those, okay? Or they can have what we call general science in grade 10, which is basically, it's a little bit of, when I say a little bit, it's basically almost a term of physics, biology, chemistry, but we also throw in some ESS, which is Environmental Systems and Societies, which is basically a diploma program course. So we are trying to give them as much opportunity as possible in grade 10 to know what they want to do in grade 11. Okay, I know I'm spouting a lot of different information here, but hopefully this all makes sense eventually. So to cut a long story short, at the end of grade 9, students need to make a choice, and it's related to the sciences, design, and arts. Students need to choose 3 subjects. So they might choose 1 science, design, and 1 of the arts. They might choose 1 science, 2 arts. They might choose 2 sciences and design, or 2 sciences and 1 art. So it's basically 4 permutations. And that's pretty much it. And we'll have many more conversations with grade 9 parents and grade 9 students during the year. And if you're wondering what the rationale is behind that, it is working backwards from the DP and noticing that students would benefit from having more skills-based science teaching in grade 10 to get them more ready for a rigorous physics, chemistry, or biology course. It's not that our results have been bad, it's just that it's so crammed in that the physics teachers and the chemistry teachers think this is the greatest thing ever, and so does our DP coordinator. So let's see. Okay, so there's no real description required for phys ed or PE or PHE, as we have to call it. And the funny thing is, it's actually not compulsory for all students to do PE after grade 8, but we make it mandatory. So all students do PE. And then finally, the language acquisition group. You all know we offer French and Spanish, as well as Arabic B, which is mandatory for all students. Any questions about the subjects before we move on? Yeah, well, I mean, I'm saying it's not that simple for everyone. You don't always know what you want to do. But if you look at most other systems in the world, they do make choices at that age, sometimes even earlier. So, yeah, it's possible to change your mind to an extent, and that's a whole nother discussion in terms of when are they eligible for higher level subjects in grade 11 or standard level based on what they've done. And that will become very clear during the year. We will explain it to the students. And please stay behind if you've got any specific questions about that. No, it's not about the content. It's about this. There might be a tiny bit of content, but it's mostly about skills. It's a skills-based curriculum, ultimately. Higher level, yes, it would be a problem. If you do general science, you will not be allowed to do higher level in any of the sciences because you just wouldn't have covered enough. So if you do a full year course in biology, chemistry, or physics in grade 10, you're eligible to do any of the high levels. If you do, let's say I do chemistry and physics and I don't touch biology, I'm still able to enter standard level biology. Okay, sort of counterintuitive, but it works. Okay, should we move on? Oh, okay, so those of you who have had me here before, you know I like this sort of thing. So if you wouldn't mind getting your device out, please, it's time for you to do a little quiz. And I'll put it on the screen in just a sec. Okay, so generally we have a theme. You don't have to put your name in. So, Shaheen, do you want to choose a theme? Like animals or food or something? As the nickname, the username. Yeah. Instead of putting your real name, when it asks for your name in a second, you can put something else. So does everyone, but okay, you guys are just diving straight in. That's fine. Go for it.
So are we going to this joinmyquiz.com?
Yep.
Please be clear.
I think both seem to work. Are they? Does that one work? This is a new thing. It's never used to say join my quiz. Well, 13, 14 people have been successful. What have you done to get in? Right, I don't mean to add to your morning anxieties, so feel free to work with someone. Okay, 5 seconds. Okay, nearly there. Okay, Stephen, I'm just gonna close this, otherwise we'll be, unfortunately we have to wait till everyone's finished. Thanks, sorry. Okay, I think that is it. Come on. You guys are good. Okay, so reviewing the questions just quickly, we have question one, well, maybe it wasn't question one for everyone, they were jumbled up. The MYP is a written curriculum, so 41 of you said false, so of course it is false. There is no such thing as the MYP as a curriculum. It's developed by every school in their context. It's not prescribed, well, there are prescriptions, but it's not a prescribed curriculum. How many global contexts are there? We'll touch on that. There are 6. Well done, 29 of you. Each subject in the MYP is assessed using 4 criteria. Wow, almost everyone seems to know that already. That's good. IDU is Interdisciplinary Unit. We have inquiry questions, and they are factual, conceptual, and debatable. At the end of grade 10, all students do the personal project. There are 8 subject groups. And, okay, so 30 of you know, in June, we are going through an inspection evaluation by Council of International Schools, which is CIS, as well as the IB. 10 learner profile traits on the famous learner profile. And statement of inquiry or inquiry is what is included in every single unit in the MYP. ATL is approaches to learning, and that's it. Thanks for participating. Okay, so one of the things I try and make as clear as possible during these sessions and other sessions is the difference between a middle years program teacher and a teacher in a British or American or Canadian or Indian or Schweifert, any system really, is that curriculum development is massive, absolutely huge, and new teachers that come here from another system aren't always used to that. And believe me, they get used to it quickly, because the curriculum is never static. It's always changing, it's always improving, it's always evolving. So we are all curriculum developers, not simply teachers in front of a class. So in the background, there's a lot going on. Standardization of assessments. Those of you who have been in the MYP for a while, you know there are quite a few assessments. And it's very important that teachers standardize the standard of the assessments before and after. So things do unfortunately slip through sometimes. Not very often, but that's one of our main roles, to ensure that that doesn't happen. Reflection, we reflect on how the unit went, how the assessment looked. Was it received well by the students? Was it too long? Was it too short? Etc. And we do make adjustments as we go on. So just to sort of give you that picture before we move on. So in terms of the MYP unit development and the way we actually run the unit, there are the three aspects which are interlinked, which are reflection on what we've done, inquiry when you start it again, action when you're teaching, and yeah, this is pretty much how it all fits together. I'm not going to spend ages on action or reflection, because the inquiry is what really makes the MIP quite different and unique. So we'll focus on the inquiry part, and that is pretty much what's going to happen now. Lots of information. I apologize, but I will have to go reasonably quickly. Fortunately, you will have the slides and the recording. So here we go. Please stop me at any stage if you have a question. Oops. Right, so all those, the terminology up there is what goes into a unit. So we have things called key and related concepts. These are prescribed by the IB. Each subject would have an assigned key concept, well, options of key concepts. I'll show you the list of them in a moment. And then within those key concepts, you can then select related concepts. So we try and build everything around these ideas. Global contexts, we'll look at in a moment. And the statement of inquiry, inquiry questions. The subject group objectives, that's basically the criteria rubrics. And I'll talk about that when we talk about assessment, along with summative assessment. ATL, approaches to learning, we'll look at as well. I've got a few posters here to show you too. Right, so looking at the concepts, the key concepts which apply to the whole MYP, all the subjects, all 8 subject groups, are those 16 key concepts. They don't all apply to each subject. So for example, mathematics, it's suggested that the teachers use, for example, form or relationships or logic. And then for science, it would be others. For language acquisition, it would be others. And related concepts, for example, in sciences, this is a list of related concepts that teachers can work from the science guide. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. So what we try and do is work in the skills, the concepts, the context, using these as a guide. Okay, so the global context, this comes from the PYP, the units of inquiry in the PYP. There are 6, and each of them maps onto one of our global contexts. Oops, that didn't work very well. Not sure how that happened. Okay, so there are 6 global contexts. And scientific and technical innovation, personal and cultural expression, and my brain has gone loopy now. There's fairness and development, and there are a few others. Hopefully this is all clear on ManageBack. It should be there. If not, I'll make sure in the slides this doesn't do that. The diagram's supposed to be on top. Okay, so there are 6 global contexts. That is really the main aspect of the unit. Everything is wrapped within this global context. And it's the same for grade 10 students when they're doing their personal project. If they choose to create a cookbook or something, they can't just do it for the sake of doing it. It needs to be within one of these global contexts. So you might have a completely different take on it, depending on which angle you come from, which global context you're working under. So in the curriculum guides, which we still have the 2018-19 versions at the moment for the next 3 or 4 weeks, we are trying to finalize the new ones, which you can access, you should be able to access on the parent portal. If not, please see me afterwards. This is what you'll see at the start of each unit. So the statement of inquiry, which the teachers build the statement from the key concepts, related concepts, as well as inquiry questions, which we'll get to in a second. So that's just an example of what you'll see, or what you have seen in the curriculum guides. I'll talk more about these in a moment. So, inquiry questions, which I keep talking about. There's a lot of writing there, but the main part for me is this. Inquiry questions give shape and scope to a unit of study. They help to scaffold the objectives that students should strive to achieve. Now, there are three types of inquiry questions: a factual, conceptual, and debatable. The teacher will produce some of these, or the teachers as a teaching team will produce some of these when they are doing the curriculum development. However, when the teaching of the unit happens, they will extract more from the students, ideally. I'm not saying this always happens, because we do have time constraints, but ideally the students have input in these questions. So that's where the scaffolding comes in. An example from science. So the blue are the factual questions, the green are the conceptual, and the, looks like orange, are the debatable. I'll just leave that there for a few seconds, let you read them, just to get a feel for the difference, how the wording is different. So ideally, these are displayed in classrooms. These are always there. So if a unit lasts 6 or 8 weeks, the students don't forget what are the main concepts, what are the main inquiry questions we should be thinking about. Students have a lot going on, so you need to keep reminding them. Okay, so the ATL skills, we could have an entire hour on ATL skills, which we won't do, but basically, there are approximately 134 skills, which I'll pass these around in a moment. And they are divided into 5 categories, 10 clusters, and the 5 categories are those. And they are an integral part of all MIP units of study. It's not a case of students have to know all 134 skills. That would be counterproductive. We do build into each unit, in each subject, some skills, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, and teachers will explicitly focus on these skills, and students will work on these skills, and students will reflect on these skills and rate their own performance of these skills. In each reporting period, you'll notice that ATL appears on the report. Okay? This is not an exact science. So there are 4 categories of ATL skills. You can either be a novice, or you can be a learner, or you can be a practitioner, or you can be an expert. It's not always clear-cut. We don't always know exactly which students are what for which skills. However, we try our best to be as accurate as we can. It's more useful for the student to know how well they are doing. So the more opportunity they get to reflect on their own skill development, the better. And we also have something called the core skills. And one of these is in every classroom. The core skills are things like, well, actually, I've got a slide, I think. I'll come back to that. Okay. So the core skills, things like managing time, note-making, listening, staying on task, being organized, researching, remembering, setting goals, reflecting, things we sometimes take for granted. But each of these actually is a specific skill, and there are sub-skills within those headings. So basically, once the student has gone through grades 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, with any luck, they would be skillful, and they will be ready for the diploma program, and then ready for university. We have students arriving at university feeling like they've already done first year. In fact, some of them even get exempt from their first year, because the MYP and the DP are rigorous in terms of all these foundational aspects. It's not throwing content at students, although that does happen. So coming back to this slide, So ATL Skills is all the way from PYP up to the diploma program. The only difference is that in the MYP we have these 10 clusters. And can I just see a show of hands if you have a grade 7 child? Okay, so you hopefully would have received an email from me. We have subscribed to something called tracker apps, which is very exciting. So the students will be recording every time they do a skill. They'll simply record the category and the cluster, and then upload a piece of work or just a paragraph explaining what it was about. Throughout the year, we'll be tracking the performance of all the students in all the different areas or clusters, and hopefully this pilot is a success and we roll it out next year in other grade levels, because it potentially has a lot of merit in terms of the students then tracking their performance throughout the years, not just in one grade level. Although there's always a cost involved, so hopefully it works nicely, as it should. Any questions about ATL Skills at all before we move on, or anything else? Okay, so IDU, the Interdisciplinary Units, as I've mentioned, as I'm sure you've come across, is one unit in each grade level. So it seems like not enough, because the MYP, we like to get subjects together as much as we can, and I do that in terms of getting departments together, analyzing skill, horizontal and vertical articulation, looking at data, that sort of thing. But in terms of the actual nitty-gritty departments working together, it's tough. This is a busy place. So we have 5 units, one in each grade level, where the departments actually work together. The students do an assessment which is driven by both departments. So grade 6, currently they do a unit on the Romans, which is individuals and societies with English. In grade 7, PHE with science, that's on a fitness plan and the human body systems. We have mathematics and design, designing a Formula 1 car. Arts and English, that's definitely my favorite, where students have to come up with a trailer for a modern version of Macbeth. So it links the different arts, because remember in grade 9 students do different arts. So it works for drama, music, as well as visual arts. So they approach this from their own subject with English. And finally in grade 10, mathematics with PHE. This is statistics and fitness plans, and analyzing your fitness plan and how well it's gone and that sort of thing. Okay, so moving on to assessment. Is the sound working, Mr. Ivan? Okay, so that's just a quick snapshot video of assessment in the MYP. I think it's quite a nice little video, which I keep using, but I know it's quite quick, so we'll go through some of these details. So each of the subjects is A, B, C, and D in terms of the assessment criteria, and those are the different A, B, C, Ds for the different subjects. You'll notice that knowing and understanding is quite prevalent. In 5 of the 8 subjects it occurs, but it's quite different in the B, C, D in all the subjects. So your children, are getting used to this. You'll get used to it. After the first sort of few assessments, it should hopefully become more clear. Every time a teacher does an assessment with the class, they will put the task on ManageBack, the task sheet sometimes, and automatically you will have the descriptors of the A, B, C, D, what to expect. We try and make it as transparent as possible. That's the point. Sorry, any questions? Any questions about any of these at the moment? Nope. It's the same for the interdisciplinary unit. It's also A, B, C, D. And for the personal project in grade 10, it's the same. Yep. It depends on the nature of the assessment. Sometimes in the feedback on ManageBack, which I'll talk about soon, the teacher will actually take wordings from the rubrics and say that whoever achieved this didn't achieve this. Sometimes that is useful feedback. Other times it's not as useful. But yeah, they will always have the rubric. So if they got a 5 or 6, they can look, and that should hopefully answer some of the questions. As far as possible, prior to grade 10, we try and write the rubrics in child-friendly language as well. So more, you did this specific to the subject, not just a sort of general terminology. Does that make sense? Or sort of? Okay, well, technically, if you get a 6, you are doing exceptionally well. Okay, if you get a 7 or 8, you are working above grade level. That's the description of them, where we have a lot of students that do get 7s and 8s because they just put in the extra time. But if a student gets a 5 or a 6, they're doing pretty well. If you want to look at the benchmark that we get judged by ADEC, for example, they are very interested in the percentage of students achieving 5 and above, and the percentage of students achieving 4 and above. And those are the 2 numbers that they like to work with. So I don't like to use the word average at all when it comes to MYP, but in this case, if your child is getting 5s a lot, they are probably just above average. If they're getting 6s, they're doing very well. If they're doing 7s and 8s, they probably need to think about having more holistic approach. I'm joking. It's just great. We get some students that get straight 7s, which is extraordinary. Okay, so the final grade for a term or semester, we have the A, B, C, and D. So the students will do quite a few A's, B's, C's, and D's. In some subjects more than others. Some subjects have the bare minimum number of assessments. Others sometimes over-assess, which we've tried to scale back on a lot. But ultimately, in a reporting period, and we'll talk more about reporting next time, you will have, the students will get a final mark, or total, out of 32, so 8 times 4. That then translates into their level, or grade, which is out of 7. Okay, so on the report, each subject will be out of 7. Okay. And the grade boundaries are as follows. So that's at the bottom end. We try and avoid too many 3s and certainly 2s, but they obviously pop up. And the description, this is from the IB guide, so these are the general grade descriptors. So 28 is that magical mark that many students aspire to get 28. So if they get 27, they're highly upset. And the teacher will look and see, is it possible to make it 28? But we can't make it 28 if it's not 28. So, once again, I'll explain more next week about how the teacher comes up with the final grade as well, because it's quite a different process in the MIP. So in terms of assessment criteria rubrics, as I alluded to before, we are provided by the IB with a rubric for MYP 1, 3, and 5. In other words, grade 6, 8, and 10. So grade 6 has their own rubric. Grade 7 and 8 will work on the MYP 3 rubric, and grade 9 and 10 work on the MYP 5 rubric. Basically, the wording is just slightly more sophisticated as you go along. It's pretty much the same. They are unique to each subject and each strand, and I'll show you what I mean by strands in a moment. Each strand has to be assessed a minimum of twice per year, and sometimes it's assessed a lot more than twice, sometimes only twice. That's where I was talking about the minimum number of assessments. So, for example, I can't remember what subject this was. Anyway. So this is for year 1. So we're talking the grade 6 rubric here, and the strands are these things. So strand 1, strand 2, strand 3. Sometimes an assessment would only be applicable for 1 or 2 of the strands. As far as possible, we try and design the assessments so that they cover all the strands. Otherwise, you just need more and more assessments, because we have to cover each strand twice in the year. So that's where the big jigsaw of assessment comes in with the teachers. And moving on, that's at the upper level, level 5, 6, 7, 8, depending on how well the students achieve these related to the task. Okay, so coming to communication from the teacher about the assessments before and after. Okay, I'll come. First, the question. Not at the moment. Only when they put the task on ManageBack, you can see the rubric. I have emailed Miss Esty, who's our marketing lady, and she is going to put all the subject guides on the website or the parent portal, whichever is easiest, and that will include all the rubrics. Yep. She's been on leave for the last while. It's separate. When the guides I mean are the official IB guides, which I think some parents are more interested in than others, but it does include the actual rubrics, which takes up so many pages. That's why we just don't put it in the guides. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So communication. Basically, if I'm doing an investigation, which I am next week with my grade 10 class, I will put the task on ManageBack, ideally a week before. It doesn't always happen as a week before in terms of putting it on there, but in terms of the teacher telling the students, they should be telling them at least a week prior to the assessment. If not, please inform the teacher or remind them. I mean, this does happen. We are a busy place, but we do strive to stick to our high expectations that we set. And we know that students do get anxious and busy, and we don't like to give them too many surprises. Most assessments are returned within 2 weeks. We used to have the policy of 2 weeks and that's it. But it just doesn't work like that in terms of the different nature of the different subjects. So if you're doing a short criterion A maths test, for example, it's quite easy to just churn through that, and the teacher can mark it and have all the comments on ManageBack within 3 hours sometimes. If it's a teacher who teaches grade 7 humanities, and they have 3 classes, so that's about 78 students, and each piece of work takes over an hour to mark and comment on, sometimes 2 weeks is pushing it, especially with everything else that goes on. So we do extend it to 3 weeks. If it's longer than 3 weeks, please email myself or the head of faculty. And yeah, but we are all human. On ManageBack. Yeah. Yeah. And ManageBack has made some improvements in the parent view in the last few years. So you guys can see pretty much everything if you dig deep enough. Okay, that's the example I was mentioning. Not trying to make excuses, just trying to be realistic. So, as many of you probably know, we don't do long narrative comments in the reports at the end of semester 1 or semester 2. The reason for this is because teachers are providing comments on a regular basis, consistently, in all the subjects on ManageBack. So, if you're not receiving enough information on ManageBack after an assessment, please let the teacher know. Just ask them for more information. Teachers are busy people, but they do know that they are expected to either have a decent comment on the work itself or on ManageBack or in class with everyone. But as long as there's enough feedback, if there's not enough feedback, please let them know. And as I said, the comment might be quite generic in some cases. It might even say, refer to the task, where there might be another comment. Just, it depends. I mean, different subjects, different tasks. There's so many different types of assessments. There's a whole list. There's about 12 different ways that we can assess. And you'll discover that as we go through the MIP. Okay, I'm pretty much done, apart from I've included 3 things here, I'll come back in a moment, which might be useful as a sort of a reference for you as you go through the year. So in terms of retaking assessments, it's just not feasible. If a student does poorly on an assessment, we can't just say, okay, you can redo it. It just can't work like that. It's not feasible, especially in a school this size, and it's not part of the MIP philosophy. However, we do try and give them as much opportunity to improve. If it's an assessment like something that they've taken home and worked on, or a combination of class and home, we do try and give them as much advice and pushing along as possible, especially in a subject like design. They get so many opportunities to improve on their work. But ultimately, if they don't do as well as they wanted to, especially in the math test as well, we can't just say, oh, that's okay, just have another go. The only exception to this is over here, in grades 6 to 8, because the fundamentals in a subject like maths are so important, and you realize when you're teaching grade 9 and 10, many students don't have the basics from grades 6 to 8. We do just push them a little bit harder. If they get a 2 or a 1 in a maths test, criterion A, they're pretty much writing their maths obituary already, which is not really acceptable for us. So we will get them to do another assessment and try and push them up to a 3 at least. But that's really the only exception to this rule about retaking. Infringement Protocol, not something we hope our children will be involved with, but this does happen. So if they fail to hand in a summative assessment or assignment, there is a protocol in place. So I'm not going to read the whole thing to you now, but ultimately it's going to be a 0 until X, Y, and Z happens. And you can read that in Okay. Thanks. That's the next slide. So, what if a student is absent for an in-class timed summative assessment? I mean, we have 789 students, and there are some individual cases which are going to fall out of this remit. But basically, the important part is here. The student must arrange to take the timed assessment within 3 days of returning to school. If it is the next day, if they've come back from being ill, sometimes it's feasible. I mean, they might have already been ready for their maths test. Why would you wait another 3 days type of thing? So it's this is all a little bit of a gray area, I suppose. But ultimately, it's very important that your child just communicates with the teacher via email. If they are sick and there's a test on that day, I mean, it says here that the teacher should actually communicate with the student and parent. But I guarantee it's not always going to happen. Teachers have a lot going on. So, yeah, if your child is absent, they are sick, and they're very sick, so when they come back to school, they're still not functioning perfectly, please let the teacher know, and we will try and delay things. But a lot of the time, it's a child's been off for a week. The other students need to get their assessments back so they can review them, and then you still have to wait, and then we're being unfair on the child because we're not waiting longer. So I think just open communication is key, and it's essential, really. That's the end of the presentation, and it's 9 o'clock. That was amazing. So any questions? If you'd like to stay behind as well for questions. Yep. Sorry, just one here.
Sorry, it's fine, because my question is not related to this.
All right.
What if somebody is not satisfied with the way the teacher evaluated a test or assessment?
The teacher, speak to the teacher. Well, you should speak to the teacher. Ask for clarification, and if there's still issues, then go to the head of faculty. And hopefully not me, but you can come to me ultimately. Yes, I'll just use a microphone. So in terms of students transferring from other schools, they do it at all different stages. We have students coming here in grade 10 who have been in a Schweifert system all their life, or in an Indian system, and that's quite a shock to them. However, we are a nurturing environment, and we try and help them through. I'd say grade 8 is probably a hard time, because that's when... grade 9 is a good time. Grade 9 is a good time, yeah. Yeah, okay, well, thank you very much. You're more than welcome to look at some of these posters or chat to me about anything else. We have to be out of here in 10 minutes because they're using the auditorium at 9:15. Enjoy the rest of your day. See you next week, hopefully.